The inner circle ties up some rather obvious loose ends. John reaches out for help, and Reed gives us a little sneak preview of things to come. But mostly, this week was about family missing family, and the effects that can have. On The Gifted, Season 2, Episode 2, unMoored. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to this week's review of The Gifted. So, standard spoiler warning does apply. Alright, so, family, missing family, really, that is the kind of focus, overall focus of this episode, certainly from an emotional standpoint. We've got our young sisters, Christina and Jasmine. Well, Christina missing her sister Jasmine. Getting some good news though. Jasmine spotted in Alexandria, and they get a nice little reunion. In some ways, kind of the smoothest missing family arc of this episode. And I have to say, in some ways, I thought that went kind of quickly. I thought this was going to get something that would drag out a little bit more. But even from that standpoint, we start to see sort of the effects of missing family does, how it throws us into emotional turmoil, which is to be expected. But when you have mutants, that emotional turmoil kind of has a bigger cost. They said even with Christina, we saw that brief little shot of her getting upset, missing her sister. She's the only family I have left. And her powers kind of exploding, knocking the sconce off the wall. Again, a small little moment, but that kind of feeling, those kind of effects is what's reverberating throughout this episode. We even have, the other one is kind of Marcos and Lorna. Marcos missing the birth of his baby. Completely understandable. And is it just me, or is Marcos always seemingly using his powers to do work? He was doing like metal work on the car before. Here he's kind of carving. This seems to be Marcos's little things. When he's upset, he works his powers. He does metal work. He does carvings. An artistic way of focusing mind. But we learn a little insight. How his first date with Lorna. Spent $200 on a bottle of champagne. Delicious from what Kate says. But we're seeing sort of his emotional thrust, his sort of doubts and insecurities and just emotional pain from missing the birth of his child. I have to say, I did think that was kind of an interesting moment throughout all of the kind of emotional stuff that Kate's been going through, that she is the one that sort of gives him the advice of not to cave into despair, not to lose oneself in despair, that you've got to sort of maintain hope. Specifically, not that she has fallen into despair, quite the opposite. She has been fighting and pushing, but that sort of emotional thrust does sort of have its effect. And again, that's something else we'll get into with a little bit. Really not much else with Marcos, just that sort of missing thing. We get the little moments there with Lorna. I have to say, did love the bat signal at the end. I know we're crossing comic properties here. But using the broken shards of the champagne bottle to sort of send up a flare of notice, a little message that Lorna could see to sort of recognize, look, Don, Daddy is out there, he is saying hello. That was sort of a nice little moment, reflects back to season 1, how we had that little scene where one of the first ways he used his powers for his own enjoyment was using broken glass to sort of make little light shows and stuff. So, I mean, that was kind of a cute little moment. I have to say, the rain, as a, falling under a depressed moment, oh, I'm sad, and it rains. Little cheesy, but we've got to forgive the show. It does dive into the cheese a little bit. Now, someone else feeling the effects of loss of family is Jace, who we haven't seen in the first episode there, so it's good to kind of catch up and see what's going on with him. Obviously, not with Sentinel Services. He quit at the end of last season. Now looks like he is working for a security company, maybe his own security company. Didn't really get too far into that. But he is trying to separate himself from his obsession with mutants. I do appreciate that at least he seemed to notice something odd about the electrical storm in DC, which nobody else did apparently. Sorry, I do have sort of a problem with that, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But really what we're seeing with Jace is his need to kind of separate from that pursuit of mutants and the effect that that has had from his family. I have to say, I think one of the most emotional scenes of this episode came with that little bit between him and his wife as he is throwing away his files and makes the comment of, I realize that you didn't just lose a daughter on 7/15, you lost a husband as well, and I can see that now. You know, that's just, I think that was one of the more grounded scenes that we had in this episode, really of just, again, that emotional toll, how much loss can affect us, that it not only hits us emotionally, but it causes us to separate and distance ourselves even from those that we love, which we're seeing amongst Reed and Kate and the family there as well. So it's a nice little scene. I was glad to catch up with Jace. I was glad to see that at least he noticed that something was odd about that electrical storm in DC. But his willingness to kind of step away, to see the cost, the toll that this obsession, that this emotional loss has had, not just on him, but his relationship with his wife, and recognizing that, I really, really appreciate it. And the Struckers, of course, dealing with their own family loss issues and the effects that that is having on all of them. And of course, we are looking at Andy's sort of separation from the family. From the rest of the Structers' standpoint, we of course have seen Kate's obsession with going after Andy, believing that he's alive, willing to do anything, risk anything, including getting shot, as we saw last week, to try and track him down. Now Reed, on the other hand, I think is obsessed more with, or focusing more on trying to maintain the rest of the family that he has. And that's the conflict that we're seeing really between Caitlin and Reed. Caitlin trying to reach out, reunite the rest of the family. Reed concerned that he's going to lose someone else. And of course, that stress is having the adverse effect on his corticoid levels, which is allowing his sort of mutant powers to start to sneak out, which he's been trying to keep under wraps. Was a little surprised that he has not yet shared with Caitlin what he was going to share at the end of last episode about his powers starting to come out uncontrollably. But, you know, that is the sort of drama we got to sort of hold on to here. But what I really found this interesting here was the dream sequence. I mean, we saw Lauren experiencing that last week and just thinking that she is seeing something, maybe having a little connection. Obviously saw Andy with his new hairstyle and his new outfit, so she is definitely perceiving into the reality of the now. But in tonight's episode, we got to see Andy's side of it, that he is experiencing the same vision, the same viewpoint as Lauren is. So it's not just a semi-psychic connection. They're actually both having the same dreams and being affected by them. Here, again, a little bit further into it, it's not just the powers coming out, Andy's obsession with Fenris, that is our destiny. But apparently, as the dream goes on, Lauren falls over the edge, potentially to her death. We don't know. She sort of disappears, as dreams do. But that loss really affecting Andy. And again, we're seeing sort of a difference of how that affects mutant powers as well. We saw in the beginning episode, Christina, worried about her sister, is lashing out with her powers. For Andy, it's having the opposite effect. It is preventing him from concentrating, from focusing, and thus from using his powers, which is a problem when he is training for some sort of assault. I'm assuming some secure facility, which is why it has to go through going through all these walls of different concentrations, of different thickness. But lack of concentration means that he can't do that job. And if he can't do that job, then he is not of any use to Reeva. And not being of any use to Reeva is going to have much bigger consequences for Andy than just missing his family, as we saw. Now, there was one scene, remember we had Evangeline, which I will get into again shortly, talking about Reeva being one of the most powerful mutants, ruthless. Now, I'm not sure about most powerful, potentially most powerful left after 715. From the example we saw of her powers last week, doesn't seem super powerful. But I would definitely agree on the ruthless part, and perhaps that's something they sort of lean into a little bit more. That's not necessarily the strength of your powers, but your willingness and ability to use them that makes her the most dangerous. Certainly about ready to take out Andy when she suspects that he even potentially could be going back to his family, could potentially give away their secret. But Andy luckily did manage to say something to her, did sort of admit what was going on, I'm sure as he do. Well, she was about to sort of take him out. I don't think that he knew that. Luckily, he took the step forward when he did. But again, this is how sometimes a mental attitude can sort of shift things around. And I appreciated the Reeva turned sort of Andy's concern to her advantage. Yes, you're missing your family. Great. Use that. Don't forget about them. Use that. Use that power. Use that emotion. Use that doubt. Use that fear to power you. I am trying to create a mutant world. I'm trying to create a better world. A world for you and your sister. And that gives Andy that ability to sort of turn things around. So I have to say, I sort of appreciated the fact that she took that information, appreciated that he was being honest with her, and then used the psychology to get him in a way to sort of focus it. To not be distracted because he's missing his family, but use that emotion of missing your family to focus him, for him to make a better world, do what needs to be done to make that better world. And as we saw, it was effective. Okay, so speaking of Evangeline, we might as well jump in with her too. So yeah, a little bit of history between John and her. That Evangeline recruited John from his Logan cage fighting days. Sorry, whenever I see cage fighting, I'm going to think of the first X-Men movie. Maybe this is just something that mutants do. If you're super strong and it's hard to hurt you, it seems like an easy way to make cash. And I loved his sort of obsession with drinking. I'm rehydrating right now with a beer. Sort of loved that moment. But she was the one that sort of recruited him, gave him a reason for being, to go down and to lead the Atlanta section there, the Atlanta HQ. Interesting to see that he sort of had a little pill addiction there, and she sort of helped him branch away. I'm not sure if that was totally necessary. I mean, it gives us, I guess, that shows us that John was down and that he was weak, and that she did, you know, she sort of stepped up and was there in his rough transition. So, I mean, I guess in some ways that kind of helps. I don't see how that particular bit of information really develops his character all that much. I mean, again, maybe showing him sort of a little bit of weakness. Hopefully, since they have touched on this, this is going to be something that maybe will be touched on again throughout, you know, later on in the season, that we'll see some other effects of what his addiction did, or how hard that was to sort of break, maybe that he might fall back. I mean, it just, if you're going to deal with addiction, if you're going to reference it, it shouldn't just be sort of a throwaway scene, which that sort of felt like. I think it would be better to have that have sort of a bigger effect. It's the first we've sort of really seen about it. So just saying that, oh, I was going through some rough time and she helped me through that, I don't know. Again, you would think that that would connect John and Evangeline a little bit more. And yet, as he shows up, not really much of a connection there. A lot more anger about the loss of Atlanta, which again seems to be something that we're hammering down on this. Best line in that scene, though, given by Marcos, the Lizard of Oz. Okay, that's a good one, Marcos. I appreciated that. But again, a little bit of emotional stuff. Hey, why are you here? You know, it just, I don't know. It was an okay scene. Really what came out of that, though, was our reference for what we're going to be seeing, thankfully, later in the season, and that is when she gives John the name of Urg. Urg, who lives in the tunnels under DC. You're here and living in the tunnels? Yes, that is the Morlocks. Urg, one of the leaders of the Morlocks, able to absorb energy and shoot it back out. So, very excited to see some Morlocks. My only concern is, are they going to go all the way? Because Morlocks, you know, are the rejects. They're the ones that have to live underground because their mutation is such that they can't be above ground. I mean, we have Blink, I mean, I guess maybe kind of giving a little sneak peek of this, who has to put on a little makeup and wear some contacts in order to go out into the world. But the Morlocks, you have people that look like pterodactyls and demons. Can't change like Evangeline did, always look like demons. Half melted, mud people, all sorts of crazy stuff. Toad kind of people who can't come out into the regular world. So if you're going to have Morlocks, all I'm saying is, and thank you, if you're going to have Morlocks, that is awesome. You kind of got to go all the way. You really have to show why these people are living, why these mutants are living underground. So I'm crossing my fingers. Even if you don't see a lot, just give us a good indication that even just give us a few people that we see that will, you know, just give us a glimpse of what the rest of the population down there may look like, and I'm going to be happy. All right, tying up loose ends. Yes. Okay, remember last week I was talking about somebody is going to have to notice this giant electrical storm going on over DC. And, okay, it made the paper as some sort of, and I guess the Inner Circle put out some story that it was a localized thunderstorm, lightning strike that overloaded some power systems. Yeah, I gotta agree with Jace. This went on for like a half hour. That's not, that is not an electrical zone. So, I mean, okay, they referenced it, but I think they did an overly quick cover-up for what that was. Now, I do appreciate that we did get the line of our engineers said that the armory should be able to contain her power. So there was kind of some thinking about it, but still, I think they should have taken her far away, upstate New York, someplace isolated, out in the country. Virginia's near. There's a lot of forest and stuff out there. They could probably have hid some things. Or C-section, knock her out, do something. Anyway, so I'm glad they at least referenced it, but I don't like their cover story. I think that's sort of a weak way of just sort of shuffling it away. However, the rest of the tying up the loose ends, taking out the guard, taking out the owner, blowing up the building, that I appreciate. I think that's what they should have done in the first place. I don't understand just trying to buy off the owner, give him some cash, like under pressure if somebody starts asking questions, he isn't going to cave in a moment. So yes, I appreciate that Reeva thought ahead and was like, okay, let's sort of take this out. These people are untrustworthy. Yes, that is very true. But I think it's something that they should have taken care of a little bit beforehand in the first place and not have to deal with all of this extra stuff. We have gotten to see, the other thing that we did get with this is starting to see a little split between Esme and her sisters, which, again, is something I appreciate. If you just keep them blank as they are, those characters don't evolve. They're not interesting. They're just a trio of troublemakers wandering through. Now that we have Esme starting to maybe have a little bit of compassion, a little bit of heart, maybe a little rebellion against her sisters, now we have the potential to see something interesting. And also led to one of the funniest scenes that we had this week, and that is getting rid of the owner, looking like they're going to walk him into the propeller, which you see the plane start up and just, yeah, you want to take a walk, that's where he's heading towards, you thinking he's going to walk into the propeller, and then, boom, truck comes and takes him out. Okay, it's dark humor, I admit that, but still unexpected, so I have to appreciate. And I'm wondering here, they sort of, they had a little look there with Esme, who responded about, "This is what you get for calling me soft." So did she separately control the driver to hit him as opposed to walking into the propellers? I mean, in some ways it's smarter, much less messy that way. Much more natural, somebody walking out just getting hit in the truck as opposed to walking into propellers. Makes a lot more sense. But are we starting to see a separation of power usage, maybe a not always connected trio there? So like I said, this gives the potential for some interesting storylines to start to develop and makes the sisters there also more interesting just by nature. So we talked about our most emotional scene, we talked about our funniest scene, but something we haven't talked about yet, and which I didn't have touch on last week, is our Scene of the Week for this week. And like I said, didn't have one last week. Honestly, it was just sort of a little introduction week, a little basic scenes. I didn't see anything that really sort of stood out to me. But this week we did have a nice standout scene, and that's the little scene between Lauren and her father. How he tries to reach out about Lauren missing her brother, and she kind of gives a little throwdown about the effects of Atlanta. And I appreciate the scene for a couple of reasons. One, because we actually get to see that there was a big effect. How many people died? 15 people died when the Fenris twins took out the Atlanta HQ. And that is weighed heavily on Lauren. This is something she has not talked about. And more to the point, something the parents haven't brought up with her. Another reason why she's probably missing her brother is she has no one to talk to about this. But she's been reading up on the families. She knows their names. I mean, this is the first that we've really seen kind of the heavier effects of what losing Atlanta was. Between John and Evangeline, she's upset. We had the fall of the Atlanta HQ, and Sentinel's gone out, and it's been raiding other places. Other things have lost. Sure, in that way you see the sort of cascading effects of that loss of the Atlanta HQ. But here's the first time we really see the personal strengths of what that act actually took from Lauren, and this is not something that she has forgotten. So it was a great sort of emotional punch, I think, right there. And then followed up with, of course, the stress effect that has on Reed, and we get our first preview into Reed's powers, which looks like the ability to degrade matter. When he grabbed onto the filing cabinet, and it just disintegrated kind of under his hands. He goes into the wall, and we had like Shatter, who was able to sort of weaken the walls in some manner. Here we have Reed touching it, and it just degrading. Again, not melting, like the actual matter there just degrading out of existence. So some serious power going on underneath, inside of Reed right there. Gonna be tough with his inability to control it, but that's why he's going to have to share this. They cannot hold this secret any longer because he is going to need help controlling this. He's going to need a place to sort of develop this, or it can have some serious hard consequences. So yes, a lot of strength in this scene. We're seeing the effects of Atlanta. We're seeing how that's affecting Lauren, and another depth of the reason why she really wants to reconnect with Andy, the only other person that was there with her that possibly could be feeling the same things that she is. And of course, Reed's personal cascade, I don't know, his degradation, finding powers that degrade matter. All right, just a couple of small things. One, the defectors from the Mutant Underground. We got to see a little bit more of Fade following Andy, seeing him trying to use his burner phone right there, which I appreciate. And I loved Andy's little use of powers just to destroy the phone behind him. One use and get rid of it. Andy is smart in that sense, but of course hard to hide from a guy that can disappear. But so appreciate seeing Fade being used. Also Bulk, which I think we saw really briefly last episode, again still being used. He's the one that hit the explosives to take out the armory there. Again, not a big shot, but seeing that he is still around. And of course, Sage, we know she was helping buy off the armory owner before, and of course helping to run the tests for Andy today. So do appreciate that we haven't just lost these defectors, that they are being used by the inner circle. Only thing I would like to see is maybe a few more mutants from the inner circle to know that these aren't the only ones. Reeva had some other people in her pocket beforehand that she didn't have Esme and the sisters kill. Just would be nice to see. Oh, and speaking of John, he is a terrible liar. Terrible, awful. That whole scene with Clarice there at the end. Yep, everything's fine. Yep, met her. Yeah, just gotta head on with someone else. So yeah, it's fine. Everything's fine. We're all fine. How are you? Seriously. Han Solo was a much better liar. But still, kind of same quality there. Clarice has to be suspecting a little bit more. I was kind of hoping that she might have woken up and sort of seen him with the whole punching on the bus and going through that emotional bit, because she has to know that there is more going on with him. Again, don't drag this out. Deal with it. So much more interesting as opposed to just sort of waiting for emotional stuff to sort of turn into big messes. All right, and last week I was mentioning about Andy's change of hair color and style there. Well, one of our viewers, Bannon, dropped an interesting bit of info. Apparently, this was the actor's own personal choice in the middle of summer. Decided to change his hair color. Hopefully he informed the show and didn't just surprise him with this. But I do appreciate an actor sort of making a character their own, seeing something, make that own sort of personal change. So I am supportive of this. I mean, I like the look and everything, but the fact that it was the actor deciding, you know, this is what I think something that should happen. I think this is a change that should go on. I think this would better affect my character. I really appreciate that. And Bannon, thanks for the info drop. Now, for those of you that went and joined for the Enchantment of Eternity Trivia Challenge, Round 2, thank you so much for joining us. If you saw it in the archives, appreciate you checking that out. We did have a last-minute change. Josh from Geeksiders wasn't able to make it, so Don Willie stepped back up, which allowed me to challenge him back and beat his butt to win round 2. So that should lead to an interesting face-off at some point down the road between Don and I. So as always, Mark, I appreciate you having us join in. Acton did an amazing job, but I ended up being victorious, so I'm excited about that. Also, I want to throw out a brief shout out to new viewer Nate. Hey Nate, I'm so glad that you're watching the reviews. Let me know what you think. I really appreciate you joining it, and hopefully you're enjoying the show also. So that is going to be it for us. Oh, also, I don't want to forget, Sunday, October 7th, this Sunday, we have The Return of the Walking Dead, Season 9. It's going to be Rick's last season from what everything looks like. So hopefully will be interesting. Could also be Lauren Cohan's final season also. So Andrew Lincoln and Lauren Cohan, this may be the end for them, certainly for Rick. So look forward to seeing how all of that plays out. But that's going to wrap us up for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you did enjoy this review, please go ahead and hit that like button. Thoughts, ideas, and comments, throw those right down in the section below. You can always catch me on Twitter and Instagram. I am at Darren Jakes. And if you're not a subscriber, just hit this button. You'll catch the whole rest of these reviews, plus Walking Dead. It'll be awesome. And we'll throw up a couple of our latest reviews right here for you to check out. So, that's it for me. I'm D, and I'm out of here. Catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.